Mhm.
So when you were 8, you had a near-death experience,
I did.
And suddenly could see.
I actually was able to see through much of the experience. Yes.
So tell us about that. Tell us what that was. What happened that night?
My breathing stopped altogether. And after that very frightening moment, very quickly developed a sense of tremendous peace, as if everything was going to be very, very good. My actual body was still on the bed, but I started going slowly upward through the room that I was in, through the ceiling, through another room where someone was occupying a bed, but I didn't get a chance to look very much, but through that ceiling and the roof of the building. And then I started noticing that I could tell traffic was moving slowly and awkwardly on a street that was bordering this building, but I couldn't figure out how I knew the traffic was moving. I knew I could hear some of the traffic, but I could tell it was moving without even hearing it. And I thought this was peculiar, very peculiar. And there were different shades of light constantly moving along with the cars.
And did you realize you were visually perceiving things?
I knew that I was experiencing a sense that I never experienced before. How could I know about traffic going up and down streets?
Or a trolley car?
Or a trolley. When the only thing I knew as a living person was how they sounded. This was all without really hearing them. And that was puzzling to me. Here I was still rising up through the air, and the vehicles were getting smaller as perspective was changing. There were even streetcars. There were trolleys along the same street going up or down this track in the middle of the street, or a set of tracks. And I could tell how they were moving on these tracks. But as I was rising, every vehicle was shrinking in size. And then I found myself entering a very, very fast moving, whirling tunnel. And as I was entering this tunnel, it began to narrow, the tunnel itself. It was a very steep, rising tunnel, but I was almost effortlessly rising through it. And while I was in that tunnel, there was nothing visual striking me at all. You would describe it as dark, completely dark. Something like what I could only describe as vision, but I knew there was an open meadow ahead of me, very steep in terms of grade. It was a very, I couldn't have done a hill like that easily back on the earthly plane back here, but I noticed I was coming out into it. And as the meadow was becoming more and more clear to me, I started noticing very tall trees and tremendously impressive height of the trees. Just not really knowing how to measure them. They were far higher than I could ever picture a tree. And yet these were things I never was touching. I was only noticing them through what I could only call vision. Then I knew the grass was amazingly lush and very alive. And by that time, I started noticing also that there was not only light shining at me, but there was literally light emanating out of me as well. And I thought, this is something I don't know how to explain, not at all. And yet, there it was. And it was as if I was totally bathed in that light. And that the light was...
Describe that light.
Sure. I will do it as best I can, because it is, in many respects, beyond most description, but it was a light that literally entered me and literally pervaded my entire being, like at that time. And it was extremely bright whiteness of light, and it was color, a brilliant color, like I'd never known any light like this before, but it was so bright that I got the impression that if I were to notice it, anything like this on my normal earthly plane, it would be far more than I could take, far more than I could possibly soak in. And yet, during that time, I had no problem soaking it in. In fact, I loved it. I thought I just felt like I was part of that light as the light was shining in and on me at once. And but again, much of what I noticed, I couldn't even describe at all. It was far beyond that description. Oh, by the way, by this time I was starting to hear the music, the singing, the thousands of voices singing. But what's weird is I did not see them. I did not visualize them at all. It was as if they were in the distance. And yet I was coming closer and closer to them. And I wanted to come closer. I was moving fast. I was moving rapidly up this long hill.
Up a hill. And is this like a valley? And what does it look like?
It looked like to me like the side of a very high mountain. I was actually climbing up the side of, possibly from a valley upward, in a very steep grade, tremendously steep. But then I got to this, another thing I noticed was a gate, an archway, actually, more accurately. And I could tell the archway because one thing that was peculiar about it was it had a multitude of colors, many different kinds of colors. And because I didn't know how to describe the colors, those were brilliant in themselves. And then at that point, I noted ahead of me a very imposing, very tall figure. If I were to estimate it now, it would have been somewhere around 9 feet in height. But it was definitely an angel of some sort, or at least very likely. And I noticed him, and he started speaking to me in thought. It was not in an actual voice, but it was more like thought, saying, "Brad, it is not your time yet." And I thought to myself, why not? I want to be here. There's some more love and more light and more now than I could ever even think of. I want to be here. I want to go further. And he told me in thought, again, if I were to allow that love to pervade my life, I would see this place again. And that I had a mission to fulfill on earth. And that's why it was not my time yet. I could tell there was a great deal of love in what he was telling me. And as soon as I began to agree, boom, I was back on my bed.